But I
because
like
people
it.
are like screech it.
No, don't. Oh, yeah. Stay in the C.
Yeah.
With
It's
the timing.
okay.
Yeah, I'd stay on the C.
Okay.
And I like what you're doing. You're hesitating on that. It's not on the.
Okay. It's okay.
All along my pilgrim journey.
It's okay.
It's more of a, you know where you're going.
Yeah.
It's more of a spiritual.
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to move that?
So actually,
that
you're
tempo?
moving. Actually, you're moving this over.
Yes, I like that.
Along my pilgrim journey. Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Is almost when my head is bowed in sorrow. All right. So we're
We
moving.
did it the same every time.
Everything
even
over.
though it was not what was there. It worked with what you were doing.
Lord, I
Spiritual,
want
you can do.
All right. So we're bumping that over. Lord, I want you. All right. We're
And we're just doing 3 verses. We're not repeating the first verse after we talk to them. We're just doing 3 verses.
good.
I don't know what goes with your sermon because
Good morning. A very warm welcome to you this morning to John Knox Presbyterian Church. Whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary, you're at home, or you're joining us at a later time, we are so glad we are able to be together in these ways. If you are a visitor today, whoa, here I come. If you are a visitor today at John Knox, we do have ways for you to communicate that to us. You can always come up and say hi, and we love that. There's also some cards in your pew that you can drop in the offering box at the back, and we have a swag bag for anyone who's brave enough to make themselves known here in the sanctuary. And if you're online and you are a visitor, we'd love for you to sign in. We want to be able to communicate to people. We want to be able to welcome one another. We want to know one another and be made known to each other. So help us to do that. We'd love to get to know you if you're checking us out, but you can also be anonymous, but we do have the swag. So, all right, if you are here in the sanctuary or online, you have access to a bulletin in a few different ways, and there are a few announcements I'd like to make you aware of before we begin our worship this morning. First of all, we would love to invite you to our hybrid annual meeting, which is on January 29th. That's a Sunday after church. And we will be celebrating all that God has done and all that we are prayerfully hoping that God will do together. So we hope you'll join us for that meeting as we express gratitude to God for all that has come, as we hear from different committees about what has happened, and as we hope together for the future. Also, the budget will be presented. So we hope that you will come and be involved in that meeting and in the life of our congregation. A few other announcements. Some of you have been detectives. We've had some inquiries. Where are my envelopes for 2023? I'm looking for my envelope box. Where are those? Some of you are like, envelopes? What? So whichever field you fall into, we have gotten communication from the company that provides those offering envelopes. And it's not that we're hiding them from you. We did not put them away early. We just have not received them yet. The company is having some supply chain issues, and they will be arriving in February. So we are pivoting with positivity, and we will get those to you later. But there are envelopes in the pew if you prefer an envelope to put giving in. But we will keep you posted on when those envelopes arrive. And we promise we are not playing envelope hide and seek. Although that could be a fun youth game. No, it wouldn't. So also, we just hope that as you are jumping into the new year, maybe reevaluating habits and opportunities, that you would consider getting involved in the life of John Knox Community Church, that we have a lot of things in our community to be involved in. If you like making food or serving others, the community meal is coming up on January 24th. If you have young people in your life and you're looking for a place to bring your toddlers, we have a toddler group. The women's small group on Tuesday evenings is starting back up from now until Lent. There's a men's Bible study and a Wednesday morning Bible study. So we hope that you will find ways to engage with God, with one another, and our community. And if you have questions or other ways you'd like to get involved, there's a lot of other things going on, quilting groups and knitting groups and lots of ways to be involved. So let Tom and I know, and we would love to connect you with ways to be involved in the life of our church. And worship is one of the main ways that we come together and worship God. So now, let us prepare our hearts and our minds as we worship God together this morning. Thank you to Linda and to the bell choir as they lead us in worship this morning. Today, we are going to engage with the story of Jesus in the wilderness. Jesus, who was tempted to become relevant, to become spectacular, to become powerful. Jesus comes alongside us and invites us to walk with him. But when we choose to walk with Jesus, we leave things behind. When we choose to walk with Jesus, we have to let go. And when we choose to walk with Jesus, we have to follow and shape ourselves after him. Join me in prayer this morning. Loving God, we hear your invitation to walk with you. We want to follow, but we also really want to stay comfortable right where we are. We want to receive what you have to offer, but we also want to cling to what we already have, so we can feel stuck. Loving God, open our hands, open our hearts, calm our fears. Forgive us our selfishness and our complacency. Loosen our grip and enliven our feet. And all of those gathered said, Amen.
Good morning. Put this up. I'm reading from Matthew 4, verse 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness and tested by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterward he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, only one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Linda, for reading, and thank you, Linda, for directing, and for the bell choir being here to lead us in worship. After seminary, Jess and I received a call to serve as associate pastors in Roswell, New Mexico. And I had a good friend at seminary, about 6'4", long hair, smart wit about him. And he asked me, "How are you going to get to Roswell? And why are you going to Roswell?" And I said, "Oh, they called us as co-associates, and they have a kind of small mini truck coming to pick up our stuff because we were seminary students without a whole lot of stuff, and they're going to take that. And then I said, I don't know, I'll just drive out there with Jess. And Duncan was small at that time, and he looked at me and he said, I have a better idea. Why don't we put Jess and Duncan on a plane, and you and I would just drive out there. He happened to be a big sci-fi fan. I think he was kind of curious what is going on in Roswell. These were the days of the X-Files, and so he kind of wanted to go out there and see it, but mostly I think he was a friend that wanted just to help with this journey to the wilderness out to New Mexico. He remains my wife's hero for not making her drive cross-country with a colicky kid and rather arriving later. But I remember that drive out to New Mexico with Dave, all the way from New Jersey to New Mexico, these days that we spent, and arriving there in New Mexico in the evening with stars in the sky and open terrain and desert landscape, rolling hills, just beautiful. I remember us sitting on the porch just talking outside of an empty house, and eventually the truck came with the stuff, and we moved it in quickly, and then we began sorting things out. I remember taking him to the airport, saying goodbye to him, flying him back to New Jersey, where Princeton was. And I remember the sadness of having him, leave and returning to the house alone. And some of the hurt there with saying goodbye to a friend who gave that kind of time and showed that kind of friendship, when to drive cross-country with me. And then the joy of seeing Duncan and Jess arrive and settling into that area together. About 10 years later, I had a chance to attend a seminar in Chicago in the summer and called up Dave to see if I could stay with he and Karen, his wife. And he said, yeah, sure. And so we had dinner together, and then he said, let's go out on the fire escape where we can share more. What do you mean, the fire escape? I didn't even know there was a fire escape. They were on like the 8th floor or so. And so sure enough, he lifted up the window, and we stepped outside onto the steel black fire escape. And his wasn't the only decorated fire escape there. There are other fire escapes on this apartment complex that are all lit up, bicycles, potted plants, furniture, Christmas lights decorating them. And it was there that we began to kind of talk about these 10 years, where we had been, present struggles, and where we were going. It felt honest. It felt real. And I hadn't really thought about that memory being on the fire escape until this past week. I read Vietnamese poet Ocean Vuong write about fire escapes himself in relation to the suicide that his uncle had committed. He writes, I remember when I heard of his suicide. I was a student at Brooklyn College in New York, and I went for the longest walk, and I kept seeing these fire escapes. Not buildings exactly, but accessories, iron rods fused into vessels of descent and departure. Clinging to buildings filled with so many hidden lives. All that richness and drama sealed away in a fortress whose walls echoed with communication of elemental and exquisite language. And yet only the fire escape, a clinging extremity, inanimate and often rusting, spoke. In its hardened, exiled silence, with the most visible human honesty, we are capable of disaster, and we are scared. And I said, what happens if we had that? What is the linguistic existence of a fire escape? That we can give ourselves permission to say, are you really okay? I know we're talking, but you want to step out in the fire escape? And you can tell me the truth? And I think we've built shame into vulnerability, and we've sealed it off in our culture, not at the table, not at the dinner table. Don't say this here, don't say that there, don't talk about this. This is not cocktail conversation. We police access to ourselves. And the great loss is that We can move through our whole lives, picking up phones and talking to our most beloveds, and yet still not know who or how they are. But I wish I could have found a way to share it with him more often, with my uncle, to have the courage to communicate on that urgent and open bandwidth, that we could have trusted each other with our frailties, knowing that as humans we are at best partially broken. And I was never able to explain to him what I really do with poems and words. And I think the crisis my uncle went through, and a lot of my friends, was a crisis of communication that we couldn't say, I'm hurt. I'm hurt. And so maybe Jesus and Satan step out on the fire escape. Maybe when you're hungry and thirsty, trials are more pressing, time more valuable, truth more essential. Maybe it's time for them to know who and how they really are. So there they begin this conversation that Satan starts. You're hungry. You're famished. Well, since you're the Son of God, the beloved, as I heard echoing across the wilderness a few weeks back, maybe you should turn these stones into bread. Satisfy yourself. Relieve your hunger. You're famished. Turn the stones into bread, since you're the Son of God. And Jesus responds, one should not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Later, his disciples will find him, and they know that he's gone without food, which for some of us can be a dangerous situation. We get kind of irritable. We have people that keep pushing food when they see that we are getting hungry and irritable. Here, eat something quickly. And so his disciples are saying he's been without food, and they encourage him to get something to eat. And Jesus replies, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. That's what nourishes my soul, to be about the work and the will of my Father. Later, he will take bread and bless it and break it, saying, this is my body broken for you. He'll say, all those who come to me will never be hungry. Those who believe in me will never thirst. For you see, he's not about just fast food. He's not about a quick fix solution. He's about feeding the multitudes, offering his body and allowing his life to provide us with life and nourishment for all the times that we hunger and thirst. He wants to provide. Well, the conversation continues. And Satan says, well, then throw yourself off the pinnacle of the temple. He takes him to the pinnacle of the temple. Throw yourself off, and doesn't it say that God will provide angels to bear you up so you will not dash your foot against the stone? And so Christian and I were talking this past week about this passage, and he said, yeah, I have a few thoughts about that. And I've written a few things down. I just thought he was going to give me a couple of scrap papers, and he comes into my office with his book. Behold, the angels came and served him. A compositional analysis of angels in Matthew. This is his PhD thesis from Durham. Christian A. Benderitis. So really, he should be the one up here preaching on this passage. But here I'm going to quote Christian. He didn't tell me to do this, so this is a surprise to him. But it's a lot better than what I could ever say. When Matthew's narrative describes Jesus' choice of jumping into the hands of awaiting angels or remaining safely, something significantly more solid, Jesus was at the heart of the Jewish sacred places with which the presence of the Lord is most associated. If ever there were a place to confidently trust God's protection, this would be it. For this would have been the place where one could have been most sure of God's presence. So this testing, this temptation by Satan is hitting at the core. It's the temple. Of course God is going to be there. Of course God would protect you. Throw yourself off. And Jesus replies, do not put the Lord your God to the test. There is no need to prove God's faithfulness. Jesus had already seen it. Instead of Jesus testing God, Jesus would be the one to bear us up. Jesus would be the one to support all those who are weary and broken, healing the lame, providing sight to the blind, restoring faith in others, and instead of proving and testing God's faithfulness. Christian continues, nonetheless, despite the devil's aggressive tactics, Jesus refuses to jump, declaring that his complete and genuine trust in God is demonstrated by not jumping and by believing that God will be there when needed. Jesus does not deny the potential for angelic protection, but refuses to prove God's presence by testing God. No, I don't need to jump. No, I will not jump. This conversation is important, and perhaps wrapping up until a later time. One more challenge, one more test from Satan. But this time they move off and away from the fire escape, and Jesus is shown all the kingdoms of the world. And Satan boasts, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. The thing is that the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our God, and Christ shall reign forever and ever. And maybe that's the value of the fire escape, where truth can finally be told. And Satan is the one who is then offering this lie that does not fool Jesus. And he replies, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. So maybe Satan's memory is not so sharp. There is this pattern that is emerging that Matthew identifies and Jesus is certainly aware of. So track the flow. Mary and Joseph leave Bethlehem and flee to Egypt. They return to Israel and they settle in Nazareth. And in time, Jesus enters the Jordan River and is baptized by John. The heavens open up and the voice of God is heard. This is my son, the beloved, in whom I delight. He is then led into the wilderness for 40 days and tested by the devil. Those receiving this gospel from Matthew are tracking what's being said along the way. Their ancestors, due to famine in the land of Israel, journeyed south to Egypt. Liberated from slavery, they crossed the Red Sea to enter the wilderness, where they journeyed for 40 years. They are famished in the wilderness, and they want to go back to slavery, that which is familiar. And God rains down bread or manna from heaven. They thirst and they quarrel with God and Moses. They doubt the faithfulness of God. They test God, the second temptation, yet God provides water from the rock. And then they grow restless when Moses is on the mountain with God, receiving the commandments, and they create a golden calf to worship, the third commandment. They create this golden calf to worship instead of God, the third temptation. So maybe Satan did know history and wanted to see if this one would change it, redeem it. And if so, Satan's authority would be limited. If this one really is the Son of God, the one claiming to be the Messiah and God's beloved child, if he actually is God's Son, the Messiah, the authority of Satan is diminished and defeated. For you see, Jesus will not cave. According to Matthew, while Israel failed these tests, like we fail these tests, Jesus passed them and fulfilled them, showing himself to be faithful to the will of God. That's what drove his heart and fulfilled his life, was fulfilling and being a part of the will and the purpose of God. That was what crafted and forged his identity, to see God's will, God's kingdom fulfilled. So these temptations, they not only provide evidence of the true Messiah, but also foreshadow the temptations of those who would encounter and all those who would follow Jesus. So now, Jesus invites us out on the fire escape. And we may not have even known that it was there. But the one who has been with us, journeying with us in the wilderness of our lives through all of our insecurities, has recognized that some time has passed. We've learned some lessons, but we've also hidden a lot of struggles and fears.